Being one of the rookies on this flight, they wanted me to sort of describe what it was like to get up in the middle of the night and walk out with all kinds of photographers waiting for you and flashing lights to make you blind when you tried to stumble into the trailer, and then we were on our way. It was a short 4 or 5 mile trip, and it's an eerie feeling when you get into that vehicle and there's nobody else around. And when you lift off, you'll be able to see the shock waves in the main engines. T0, the hold-down bolts are blown, and the SRB's light, and we're on our way. I personally got a chance to see the tower glide by out my peripheral vision, and then the roll shortly after tower clear. And if you look closely there, you can see the diamond shock waves in the exhaust of the main engines. John Young said after he came back from Flight 1 and saw the movies of that Eddie Shearer, was glad he couldn't see all that flame and smoke, or he'd been a whole lot more concerned during liftoff.
So everything was, in fact, done very well from the orbiter point of view, as well as a nominal countdown. Having good equipment and good procedures and good training in advance makes these deployments routine in space.
Steve and I are doing some work on the IG experiment, and I think we've gotten enough material on that experiment to get a PhD for the researcher and a couple more for me and Steve. So
I think all the training and preparation for the camera work paid off, because all of us were quite familiar with the cameras to be able to document the various aspects of this mission. This is just a 16-millimeter pass across Madagascar. Our primary objective in photography was to get still 70-millimeter of that, but we thought some movies would be nice. And this will give you a good idea of the rate at which the ground's passing under you on the various passes. You can see if you want to do still photography, you better know what you want to shoot and get your camera set up and shoot it. And we're looking at deforestation and burn off in many of the areas of the world, Madagascar being one of those.
And that's me taking some more pictures also for one of the experiments. Made a deal with the geologists in Saudi Arabia. Any mineral findings, the crew gets half, but they said no, just a thank you note. Okay. As you see, not all retrievals on this flight were successful. So let John Fabian do this one.
In fact, with Sultan, we fighted very much to have our food, and even when we were both of us fighting very much, we were not all the time very successful.
Experimenting here with some more retrievals. Those are the 2 satellites we didn't deploy.
The food service system on the shuttle works really nicely, and of course we eat a lot of rehydratable food, which is a byproduct of the backpacking industry in this country. The galley is nice to use. In fact, it works so well that we found out halfway through the flight that we'd forgotten to set 3 circuit breakers, so it works even better with everything on.
And once the food was prepared, a lot of times we'd like to go up on the flight deck and eat. It's really nice to sit there and eat and look out the window and just watch the world go by. As a matter of fact, J.O.'s hanging up there in the window trying to get one of the Earth observation passes, and I guess he was so intent on doing that he hadn't even started to eat yet. But as you can see in this pan, as we pan around the cockpit, that there was not a tremendous amount of room to spare. It gets very crowded with everybody up there.
But we optimized the window space, I'll have to say that.
That's true.
Obviously, my table wasn't ready, so I had to wait a little bit.
But the food was really good, and I think mealtime was one of the high points of the day.
That's a posture experiment. And about the French experiment, I must tell you that, in fact, all the crew was participating, because, as you see, it takes a bit of room in the mid-deck. And to help me, all the crew tried to not go into the mid-deck when I was working, and that was really great. And Shannon worked on the French echograph, you'll see later, and Sultan was working with me all the time on the posture experiment, and both experiments worked very, very well. And the French scientists, when we came back, were so happy that they could not sleep during 1 week, and we took back such a lot of good data that they could not believe. So they are very happy and very. Thank very much all the crew, not only Sultan and Chena and me.
That's what you get for letting a test pilot do medical experiments on you. So I still don't think Patrick will make a good doctor. He'll never do that. So when I did my famous 1,500 miles all in one shot. You get tired running 1,500 miles. Took about 5 minutes.
He just slept kind of free-floating behind the back seats on the flight deck. There were 4 others of us downstairs, and you'll see a camera pass through the mid-deck.
Never complain about hotel accommodations after this one.
Sultan liked it best up on the lockers. And Patrick moved around a little bit, but some nights he was on the wall with me, just above me. And if you counted heads, that leaves that's up to 6 now. And you might wonder where the 7th person is. We never really saw the 7th person, but you can just see a part of the sleeping bag hanging out from inside the airlock there, and that's where I had to tap Shannon and wake her up each morning.
That the other group of friends experiment, the echograph, and that was the first time that such sophisticated equipment could be used such early after the launch, and really it worked perfectly, and less than 3 hours after the launch I could work and take the first data.
Still haven't figured out what I'm doing there, but it's one of my experiments, the phase separation experiment. And I have to report also, like Patrick did, all the data we came back with came out really great. They did make a photographer out of me, and I'm trying to forget everything I learned.
We participated in an experiment, a tracking experiment of the orbiter called the HPTE, or High Precision Tracking Experiment. And on the second attempt, as we pointed the side hatch window with a small reflector mounted in it at the island of Maui, Hawaii, we spotted a very low-powered laser which was blinking on and off. This is a view from one of the payload bay cameras, and the iris of the camera was responding to the different intensities of light. So to the naked eye, it didn't look quite as dramatic as it does in these photos, but it did demonstrate a capability of not only the ground to track the orbiter, but the orbiter to precisely point any portion of it at a point on the ground also.
Well, after a day and a half of letting Spartan fly on its own and get its data, it was time to turn around and come back. And here we're already closing in on it on the V-bar, which we're at about 200 feet, and he's zooming in a little bit here. But the whole rendezvous went very smoothly. We had a little bit of a eye-opener at one of our burns where we had 2 jets fail, but we had practiced those in simulations so often that we went right through that with no problem. We closed in on it. Here you can see the sun setting in the background. We still don't have the explanation as to why, but Spartan did not end up in the exact attitude we expected it, so we had to do a little real-time planning up there into how we anticipated grabbing a hold of it. And essentially what we did was fly it a little bit forward in the payload bay and a little bit lower. And then John could, by moving the arm, could reach around behind it.
And here you see the view from the end of the robot arm, the TV camera sitting out on the end effector, as we call it, and the grapple target right there in front of you. Dan provided, as you can tell here, a very stable platform from which to operate the robot arm, and it's a very capable system. And this, I think, indicates that things don't have to be perfect in order to use this mechanism. And we were obviously overjoyed when we finally picked it up.
John let out a war whoop that about scared us all to death when he grabbed it.
And here you see it sitting on the arm. We kept it out there for a little bit until the sun came up so we could get some photographs of Spartan and document its condition prior to putting it into the bay. And at that time, it was time to sneak it down into the latches, and the arm did its job again here very well. It's quite a high precision device, and one which we are going to continue to use very successfully with the shuttle program. think that the really unique things about the shuttle program are the capabilities not only to put things into space, but also to bring them back to Earth. The arm is an integral part of that, as well as the capability to repair satellites in space. You can see capability to maneuver very accurately and precisely with the arm is important to us.
Well, unfortunately, like just about everything in life, all good things have to come to an end sometime. And after we deployed the satellites and got Spartan out and back, it was time to get ready to come back home. Here you see us on deorbit morning. Actually, we were very organized and everything went really smooth. It might not look quite that way, but everything had a place and we had everything in the proper place. We have to put the seats back in, and then we had to put all the dirty clothes, those were in those mesh bags, and stow them away so they wouldn't hit anybody on as we came back in. And the other brown bags floating up there were the helmet bags, and we're putting them by the seats so that everybody would have their own helmets to put back on.
Re-entry is not quite as spectacular as launch, but when you are coming through the air at around Mach 20 to 22 and you start getting the rosy glow, it's really spectacular. John was also taking some pictures looking out the back, and maybe he can describe to you what he's seeing.
This is looking out the overhead window, and the tail of the vehicle is not in sight. What you're seeing here is simply the interaction of shock waves around the vehicle converging up over the top of the spacecraft and making that very intense picture. And then back to the glow on the windows. It's very intense heat outside the glass.
Coming across California, we were heading east into a rising sun, so once again we couldn't see anything due to the haze on the windows, but once we got partway around the hack, as you see here, I could make out the runway. We'd decided to go to runway 23 as a result of the predicted winds, and as we rolled out on final, the winds were a crosswind, so you can try and predict wind, but you aren't always going to hit it correctly. At that point, it was too late to change runways, and we continued on to the lake bed runway 23. The vehicle, as has been said before by previous commanders who have flown it, handles very well, and even in a crosswind, you probably have to work a little more at it, but it still is a very precise flying machine, and all the training we get in the shuttle training aircraft certainly helps, because you can see the gear come down here when you do your first landing. It's got to be a good one for real the first time. It's good to have all that training behind you, and you feel confident that everything is going to work out just fine, as it did in this case. We touched down and pretty lightly bounced just a little bit, got the nose down, and we'd, by design, tried to do almost a max braking. They wanted 10 to 12 foot per second braking rate as we touched down. The lake bed was a little bit soft, and you can see when we start getting on the binders, there's a pretty good cloud of dust being kicked up behind it. We, I guess, have the record now for the shortest stop from wheels down to stop was 7,400 feet, and the braking profile was right on what they expected. It varied between 10 and 12 foot per second, almost all the way to touchdown. I mean, all the way to stop. Once we got stopped, we have to go through a few post-flight checklist items and shut down the APUs and the like, reconfigure the GPCs, and then it's time to get out and take a shower. Here we're coming down the steps. I almost pulled a Gerald Ford. We meet our boss, George Abbey, and everybody came through the flight in really great shape. As you can see, everybody's down, bouncing around, and sad the flight's over, but also happy to be back, and we were very pleased with the whole mission.